Hello everyone, my name is Wenbing Lu. Today I'm presenting our recent work on FRB statistics. Here's an outline of the talk. After introducing the FRB samples, I will quickly discuss the question whether all FRBs are repeating. The main part of the talk is on the implications provided by the ASCAP sample. This plot shows the current samples of FRBs as collected from the FRB catalog. The red dots shows the Parkes bursts. The ASCAP bursts are shown in blue and CHIME bursts are shown in yellow. The green dots shows the bursts discovered by other telescopes. The main assumption behind this plot is that the distances are given by the intergalactic medium contribution of the dispersion measure, or DM. I have subtracted the DM contributions from the Milky Way and their host galaxies, assuming a host galaxy contribution of 30. The vertical axis shows the isotropic equivalent energy in units of erg per hertz. If the spectral width of the bursts are, let's say, 1 gigahertz, then we simply multiply this number by a factor of a billion. These figures show the beam pattern of different telescopes. On the right-hand panels, show the Arecibo telescope and the Parkes telescope. These are single-dish telescopes with multi-beamed receivers. Looking at the Arecibo telescope, the black circle shows where the sensitivity of the beam is half of that at the beam center. Beyond the black circle, the sensitivity drops rapidly, and then there are some side lobes beyond. The star shows the location of the first repeater. It was later on realized it was found in one of the side lobes, where the sensitivity is only 10% of that at the beam center. Looking at the Parkes beam pattern on the lower right corner, we see that the beams are actually widely separated from each other. So it is likely that many bursts may occur in between beams where the sensitivity is much less than the beam centers. Going back to this plot, with these fluencies or energies provided by the Parkes observations, these are only based on the assumption that the bursts occurred at the beam centers. So these are only lower limits because they could be in between beams. Going to the ASCAP beam pattern, we see that the beams are closely packed to each other. This significant overlapping allows multi-beam detection typically. For instance, this FRB 170107 was mainly discovered by beam 13, but is also discovered by the other adjacent beams. We can make use of multi-beam detection to reconstruct the burst location as shown in red here. More importantly, the burst fluence is narrowly constrained to be near 65 Jansky millisecond. This slide is a summary of the repeater, the first repeater, which has now shown hundreds of bursts. It has been localized precisely to this host galaxy at redshift about 0.2. The figure shows the energy distribution of the repeater. The yellow histogram shows those from GBT. The blue histogram shows those from mostly Arecibo and some from other telescopes. The red histogram shows the non-repeating FRBs. An important thing to notice is that there is substantial overlap in burst energies from the non-repeating sample and the repeating sample. For instance, the brightest burst from the repeater has isotropic equivalent energy of near 10 to the 32 erg per hertz, which is close to the mean of the non-repeating sample. This figure shows a rough estimate of the repetition rates of the two known repeaters so far. The red dots shows the Arecibo detections of the first repeater. I basically plotted the cumulative number distribution in burst energies and then divided by the total telescope time as collected from the literature. The yellow dots shows the chime repeater. The green and blue arrows shows the upper limits provided by follow-up observations of the non-repeaters. We can see that the Parkes bursts are typically not followed up for long enough to exclude the possibility that they are all repeating like the repeater. But the ASCAP bursts are followed up typically for 1,000 hours. So some of them, especially the leftmost three, are inconsistent with the extrapolation from the repeater statistics. The main part of the talk is on the ASCAP sample, which now has 23 bursts, as shown in orange diamonds over here on this plot. The main reason we chose this sample is that the fluencies of these bursts are well measured, typically to about 20% accuracy. This ASCAP survey has its focal plane nearly uniformly sampled. This allows an easy calculation of the total cosmological volume observed by this survey. Of course, there are many drawbacks of this sample. For instance, it is incomplete for very short bursts shorter than about 2 milliseconds because the time resolution for the observation is about 1 millisecond. This sample is also incomplete for faint long bursts and for bursts with very low and very high DMs. Despite these drawbacks, this is still the best well-controlled samples so far. So we decided to take a look at this sample and see what we can infer from some statistical analysis. The first thing we did is to make a plot of the fluence distribution. We found that it is consistent with the power law of index minus 3/2. Below about 50 Jansky millisecond, the sample seems to be incomplete. So we throw away these 3 bursts and only make use of the 20 brighter ones. This seems to be consistent with Euclidean distribution of standard candles, since the number goes as distance cubed. However, the cumulative distribution of the dm is inconsistent with dm, or distance cubed. It is more consistent with dm to the 1.5. Another puzzle we found is that the dm distribution actually levels off above about 600. We came up with the simple model to explain all these puzzles. Instead of assuming standard candles, we assume the volumetric rate is a power law function of burst energies. We simply take an Euclidean distribution. It is straightforward to calculate the cumulative distribution in burst distances, or dm's, by performing this integral, which is the volume multiplied by a cumulative energy distribution above the detection threshold, 4 pi d squared, multiplied by the fluence threshold. This integral gives a power law of d cubed for gamma less than 1, and for gamma more than 1, the power law index is 5 minus 2 gamma. There is also a maximum distance beyond which we should see no bursts. The fluence distribution is also straightforward to calculate by performing this integral, and it reproduces a power law index of negative 3/2. We think this model provides a rough understanding of the ASCAP sample. Here are the parameters inferred from the model. So the energy power law index is about 1.7 from the dm power law index. There is a maximum burst energy, which is a few times 10 to the 33 ergs per hertz. From the normalization, we get the volumetric rate as a function of burst energies. For very faint bursts, this rate can be as high as the core collapse rate. Apart from the simple model, we also did a more sophisticated analysis. This new model still has a power law energy distribution with an exponential cutoff. The overall rate normalization has a redshift dependence characterized by the parameter beta. So this new model has 4 free parameters, one of which is the overall normalization. It is straightforward to calculate the fluence and redshift distributions and compare with data. Each data point is drawn from a Poisson distribution with the expectation given by the model, so the p-value is given by the CDF. For a cumulative distribution, the data points are not independent of each other, so we took the minimum p-value of all data points. At the end, we combine the redshift distribution and the fluence distribution because they are independent of each other. This shows the final p-value for the full three-dimensional parameter space. The yellow star shows the parameters inferred from our simplest model. The red plus shows the maximum p-value. We have considered different betas or the redshift evolutions. From the parameter space analysis, we see that the power law index, the energy power index gamma, is not well constrained. It can vary from 1.4 to 2.2. But our best fit models seems to suggest a maximum energy between 33 and 34. This plot shows the maximum p-value as a function of beta. It seems to peak around beta of 2, which roughly agrees with the cosmic star formation rate. Here's a summary of my talk. The ASCAP sample has the following implications. There is a power law energy distribution, but the power law index at this moment is not well constrained. There is a maximum burst energy of order 10 to the 33 to 10 to the 34 ergs per hertz. The volumetric rate for faint bursts could be quite high, close to the core collapse rate. There is perhaps a weak preference of the volumetric rate tracking the star formation rate. There are a number of biases potentially affecting our results, which should be studied in more detail in the future. Finally, we think all FRBs may be repeating, but at least some are not repeating as frequently as the first repeater. Thanks everybody for your attention.